Deep in the heart of the Central American jungles, a civilization once thrived with such brilliance and mystery that even today, their secrets refuse to be fully uncovered. The Mayans, architects of towering pyramids, masters of astronomy, and creators of a written language so complex it took centuries to decode, left behind clues to a world that feels both ancient and eerily advanced. But for every answer we've uncovered about this enigmatic culture, a dozen more questions linger in the shadows. How did a society without modern technology predict celestial events with such precision? Why did their great cities, bustling with life, suddenly fall silent? And what hidden truths lie buried beneath the vines and stone, waiting to whisper their stories to those who dare to listen? This is a journey into the unknown where the past doesn't just speak, it tantalizes. The Mayan civilization, with its intricate calendars, blood rituals, and sprawling metropolises swallowed by time, has fascinated explorers and scholars for generations. Yet, despite decades of research, their most profound mysteries remain unsolved. Imagine standing at the foot of a pyramid, its steps worn by centuries, and realizing that even now, no one truly knows what happened to the people who built it. The air hums with the weight of unanswered questions, and every artifact, every glyph, is a piece of a puzzle we're still struggling to assemble. Today, we're diving headfirst into 30 of the most baffling enigmas the Mayans left behind. From the chilling prophecies hidden in their codices to the sudden collapse of their golden age, these are the riddles that keep historians awake at night. Some might hint at lost technologies, others at cosmic connections we're only beginning to grasp. But one thing's certain, by the end of this exploration, you'll see the Mayans not just as figures from a distant past, but as a civilization whose echoes still reverberate through time, challenging us to uncover the truth. So grab your metaphorical torch. We're stepping into the jungle where shadows hold secrets, and every discovery pulls us deeper into the mystery. One of the most haunting questions about the Mayans isn't just how they thrived, but why they vanished. Around the year 900, their towering cities, once pulsing with life, were swallowed by silence. Streets that had echoed with the clamor of markets and ceremonies were left to the jungle, as if the people simply walked away. What could make a civilization so advanced, one that mapped the stars and built monuments to last millennia, abandon everything? The answer remains maddeningly out of reach, buried under layers of time and competing theories. Some researchers point to climate. Tree rings from that era tell a story of relentless drought, decades where the rains failed and crops withered. In a world dependent on maize, a few bad seasons could unravel society. But if drought was the villain, why did some cities in wetter regions also fall? Others argue it was war carvings depict sieges and captives, suggesting kingdoms turned on each other as resources dwindled. Yet warfare alone doesn't explain why the Mayans never returned, why their writing and traditions fractured so completely. Then there's the darker possibility, a collapse from within. Imagine a people pushed to the brink, their rulers demanding more temples, more blood sacrifices to appease angry gods. When faith in kings and priests crumbled, so might the social order. But here's the twist: no mass graves, no sacked cities, just empty homes and overgrown plazas, as if the end came not with a bang but a whisper, the truth. We may never know. Unlike the fall of Rome, there's no single conqueror to blame, no crumbling empire to dissect. The Mayans didn't vanish, they scattered, their greatness dissolving into 1,000 smaller stories. And that's what makes this mystery so chilling. It's not just about ruins in the jungle, it's a warning. Even the mightiest civilizations are fragile, and sometimes history doesn't leave a clear trail, just questions. Standing before a Mayan pyramid, you're not just looking at a pile of stones, you're staring at a riddle carved in limestone. These towering structures, their steps climbing toward the heavens, were clearly sacred spaces. But peel back the layers and you start to wonder, were they temples, tombs, or something far more ingenious? Unlike Egypt's pyramids built as eternal resting places, Mayan pyramids pulsed with life. Priests climbed their steep stairways to perform rituals under the open sky, their chants echoing as blood offerings were made to gods who demanded proof of devotion. But look closer and the story gets more complex. Take Chichen Itza's El Castillo. At first glance, it's a temple to Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. But during the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight slithers down the pyramid steps, creating a shadowy illusion of a serpent descending to earth. This wasn't just artistry, it was precision engineering, a calendar in stone. The pyramid's 4 sides each have 91 steps, totaling 364 when you include the platform at the top. Add 1 day for the equinox and you've got a solar year carved into architecture. Coincidence unlikely. The Mayans didn't just build pyramids, they encoded time itself into their walls. Then there's the mystery of their alignment. Pyramids at Tikal and Palenque don't just face random directions. Their corners line up with the rising and setting of Venus, a planet the Mayans tracked with obsessive detail. In their codices, Venus wasn't just a star, it was a harbinger of war, its appearances dictating when to attack or retreat. So were these pyramids temples, or were they giant celestial calculators? Imagine priests standing atop them, scanning the horizon as Venus blazed into view, interpreting its path as a divine command. But the most tantalizing clue might be what lies beneath. Recent laser scans revealed hidden chambers under pyramids like the Temple of the Inscriptions in Palenque, where King Pakal's tomb was found in 1952, his jade death mask staring into eternity. Could there be more undiscovered rooms, their contents rewriting history? Some researchers even speculate certain pyramids acted as resonance chambers, their stairways designed to amplify sound during rituals, a literal echo of the gods. So what's the truth? The answer might be all of the above. These weren't just buildings, they were intersections of faith, science, and power. A place where kings became gods, where blood met starlight, and where an entire civilization's understanding of the universe was set in stone. And that's the real magic. The Mayans didn't separate the sacred from the scientific. To them, every alignment, every sacrifice, every step toward the sky was part of the same grand equation. We're left with structures that refuse to fit into neat categories because their purpose wasn't just one thing, it was everything. The Mayan calendar wasn't just a way to track days, it was a cosmic heartbeat pulsing with cycles within cycles, each one whispering secrets about the nature of time itself. At the center of this intricate system stood the long count, a sprawling timeline stretching back over 5,000 years, designed not to predict doom but to map the rhythm of existence. Yet in the years leading up to 2012, the world became obsessed with a single date. December 21st, the day the long count's 13th Bacton, a period of around 400 years, would come to an end. Hollywood movies, sensational headlines, and doomsday preachers twisted this into a prophecy of apocalypse, but the truth, the Mayans saw it as something far more profound, not an ending but a rebirth. To understand why, you have to step inside their worldview. For the Mayans, time wasn't linear, it was a spiral with eras cycling like seasons. The completion of a Bacton wasn't a cliff's edge, it was a turning point, much like the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. Their writings even hint at celebrations planned for the occasion, a cosmic reset where old energies dissolved and new ones took root. Think of it like a car's odometer rolling over. The numbers change, but the journey continues. So where did the doomsday myth come from? Blame a mix of mistranslation and modern anxiety. Early researchers stumbled over glyphs mentioning the end of days, not realizing it referred to the closing of one cycle and the dawn of another. The Mayans themselves left no prophecies of catastrophe, just meticulous records of celestial patterns, proving they saw time as something to be revered, not feared. Even more fascinating, the long count wasn't their only calendar. It intertwined with the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred cycle, and the Hob, a 365-day solar year, creating a lattice of timekeeping so precise it could synchronize rituals with planetary movements. Priests used these overlapping wheels to determine everything from planting seasons to the luckiest days for war, blending astronomy with spirituality in a way that still leaves mathematicians in awe. The real mystery isn't why the world didn't end in 2012. It's how a civilization without telescopes or computers crafted a system more nuanced than our modern Gregorian calendar. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the long count is that the Mayans weren't predicting doom. They were teaching us to see time as they did, infinite, cyclical, and brimming with possibility. And that's a prophecy worth remembering. High above the jungle floor, in stone courts flanked by sloping walls, players lunged for a ball that could cost them more than just the game. This was Pak-a-Tak, the Mayan ball game, a brutal mix of sport, ritual, and life or death stakes. Picture a heavy rubber ball weighing as much as a small child hurtling through the air. Players couldn't use their hands or feet, only hips, elbows, and knees to keep the ball in motion, their bodies slamming against the hard court as they fought to score. But the real danger wasn't just the game's physical toll. For some, the final whistle meant a knife to the chest. The rules remain hazy, but carvings tell a chilling tale. At certain times, losing captains, or in some cases the winners, were led to the sacrificial altar. Their blood, spilled under the watch of cheering crowds, was an offering to the gods. Why reward victory with death? Some scholars argue the honor of sacrifice was reserved for the most skilled, their lives given to sustain the cosmos. Others believe losers paid the price, their defeat proof the gods had withdrawn favor. Either way, Pak-a-Tak wasn't just a game. It was a reenactment of the Mayan creation myth, where hero twins outwitted the lords of the underworld in a deadly ball match. Every game echoed that primordial struggle: life versus death, order versus chaos, but there's a darker layer. These matches weren't just religious theater. Kings staged them to settle disputes between cities, using the court as a battlefield without open war. A losing team might mean a kingdom surrendering tribute or territory, their fate decided not by armies but by athletes. The ball court at Chichen Itza, with its echoing acoustics and towering hoops, could seat thousands, a spectacle of power as much as piety. And here's where it gets even stranger. Some courts are aligned with celestial events like the solstices, and carvings show players adorned with astrological symbols. Was Pak-a-Tak also a way to commune with the stars? The answer might lie in the rubber itself. The bouncing ball, unique to Mesoamerica, was seen as magical, its unpredictable movements mirroring the wanderings of planets. To play the game was to dance with the heavens, so was it sport, sacrifice, or political chess? Likely all three. The Mayans didn't separate the sacred from the strategic. A single match could honor the gods or the masses and rewrite borders, all before sunset, and that's the real enigma. Pak-a-Tak wasn't just a game with deadly consequences. It was a mirror held up to an entire civilization, reflecting their beliefs, their ambitions, and their unflinching view of the stakes of life itself. Etched into temple walls and painted onto bark paper codices, the Mayan writing system is a labyrinth of symbols so intricate that for centuries, scholars dismissed it as mere decoration. Unlike the alphabets we use today, their glyphs weren't just letters, they were tiny works of art, blending sounds, meanings, and even metaphors into a single character. Imagine trying to read a sentence where every word is its own miniature painting, and you'll grasp why cracking this code seemed impossible. Yet hidden within those swirling lines and animal motifs lay the voices of kings, astronomers, and scribes, voices that fell silent for nearly 1,000 years before we finally learned to hear them again. The breakthrough came in the 1950s and 60s when a young Russian linguist named Yuri Norisov made a radical claim. Mayan glyphs weren't just pictograms. They were a mix of logograms representing whole words and syllabic signs that spelled out sounds. Picture the difference between a no smoking symbol and the letters NO. Norisov realized the Mayans used both systems interchangeably. One glyph might depict a jaguar to mean the word jaguar, while another might use a jaguar's head to represent the syllable bal. This duality made decipherment a nightmare but also a revelation. For the first time, names of rulers, accounts of battles, and even jokes scribbled in margins began to emerge from the stone. Yet even today, we've barely scratched the surface. Of the thousands of surviving texts, only a fraction have been fully translated. The Dresden Codex, a bark paper book filled with astronomical tables, reveals the Mayans could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance. The Madrid Codex overflows with rituals and divinations, but what secrets lie in the untranslated pages? Some glyphs remain stubbornly obscure, their meanings debated by experts. Others hint at lost histories, like the intriguing references to the Place of Reeds, a legendary city that might have been the Mayan equivalent of Atlantis. The real tragedy: we're piecing together a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. Spanish Bishop Diego de Landa in the 16th century ordered the burning of countless Mayan books, dismissing them as works of the devil. Only 4 major codices survived the flames. The rest, possibly tens of thousands, vanished, taking with them answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask. What medicines did their healers know? What epic poems or philosophies were lost? Every translated glyph is a triumph, but every unknown one is a whisper of all we'll never recover. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't how the Mayans wrote, it's what they wrote about. Their texts weren't just records, they were conversations across time, waiting for someone to listen. And as more glyphs yield their secrets, we're not just translating a language, we're rebuilding a bridge to a world that thought it had spoken its last word. Beneath the emerald surface of the Yucatan cenotes lies a darkness that still chills the bones of archaeologists. These natural sinkholes, filled with crystal-clear water, were more than just sources of life for the Mayans. They were portals to the underworld, guarded by gods who demanded the ultimate offering. Human sacrifice. Divers probing these depths have surfaced with horrors. Skeletons piled in the shadows, some with hands bound, others adorned in jade as if dressed for a macabre banquet. But the most unsettling question isn't just how they died, it's why they went willingly. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza tells a haunting story. Among the remains recovered, forensic analysis reveals a grim pattern. Some victims show signs of long-term malnutrition, suggesting they were captured slaves or prisoners of war, dragged to the edge and thrown into the abyss. But others, healthy, well-nourished, even wearing ceremonial finery. These weren't enemies, they were volunteers, possibly nobles or even royalty, raised from childhood to believe that sacrifice was the highest honor. Imagine standing at the brink, hearing the chants of priests, knowing your death would ensure rain for the crops or victory in battle. To the Mayans, this wasn't murder. It was communion. Politics twisted the ritual's meaning. Kings, eager to prove their divine connection, staged elaborate spectacles of sacrifice. The bigger the offering, the greater the show of power. A ruler who could persuade or force their rivals into the cenote wasn't just appeasing the gods, they were broadcasting dominance. In one account, a visiting noble from a rival city was invited to a ceremony, only to find himself the star of the show. His body, weighted with gold, sank as a message: defiance would drown. Yet spirituality ran deeper than fear. The Mayans saw cenotes as mouths of Xibalba, their underworld where the rain god Chok resided. Droughts weren't just weather, they were divine punishment. Sacrifices became a desperate dialogue with the heavens. Children, considered pure, were sometimes chosen as messengers to the gods, their innocence a bargaining chip for survival. Even the act of drowning held symbolism. Water was life, and to merge with it was to become part of the cycle. Modern tools have peeled back more layers. Isotope testing on bones reveals some victims came from faraway regions, proof of a vast network of tribute and trade in human lives. And some cenotes held more than bodies. Jade, gold, and shattered pottery hint at ceremonies where objects, too, were killed to release their spiritual essence. The cenotes don't give up their secrets easily. Currents scatter remains and centuries of sediment bury truths. But each bone, each artifact whispers the same paradox. What we call brutality, the Mayans saw as sacred. In their world, death wasn't an end, it was the price of keeping the universe alive. And that's the real mystery. Not whether these sacrifices happened, but how an entire civilization could look into the dark water and see not horror but hope. To the Mayans, time wasn't a straight line marching toward progress, it was a wheel, endlessly turning where past, present, and future blurred into one. This cyclical vision shaped everything from their towering pyramids to the blood they spilled on temple altars. While modern societies race forward, chasing some distant horizon, the Mayans saw existence as an eternal return where history didn't just repeat, it breathed. Their sacred texts reveal a universe governed by overlapping rhythms. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day cycle, wove together with the 365-day Hob to form a 52-year calendar round, a Mayan century that reset like the seasons. But the real marvel was the long count, a timeline spanning thousands of years, divided into chunks called backtons. When one cycle ended, another began, not with catastrophe but renewal. Modern misinterpretations of the 2012 phenomenon missed this entirely. The Mayans weren't forecasting doom, they were tracking cosmic seasons, much like we mark the shift from winter to spring. This worldview etched itself into stone. Pyramids like El Castillo at Chichen Itza weren't just monuments, they were timepieces. Their 91 steps per side, totaling 364 with the crowning platform, mirrored the solar year. During equinoxes, shadows became serpents slithering down stairways, a visual metaphor for time's cyclical dance. Even city layouts reflected celestial patterns. Tikal's temples align with Venus's extremes, while Palenque's structures encode the moon's cycles. Every building was a clock, every plaza an observatory. Rituals, too, pulsed with this philosophy. Kings reenacted mythic events, donning the garb of gods to reset time during pivotal dates. Bloodletting ceremonies weren't just offerings, they were moments when the veil between eras thinned, allowing the past to touch the present. Imagine a priest piercing his tongue, his blood falling onto bark paper as he channeled ancestors who'd performed the same rite centuries before. To the Mayans, this wasn't symbolism, it was time travel. Contrast this with today's linear mindset, where time is a resource to be spent, saved, or wasted. Our clocks tick forward, theirs spiraled. We feared deadlines, they celebrated cycles. Yet perhaps their greatest insight was recognizing that some things harvests, wars, even civilizations rise and fall in patterns older than stone. The mystery isn't just how they conceived such a system, but what we might learn by pausing our relentless forward march to listen to time's echo. Buried beneath the dense canopy of northern Guatemala's Patane jungle, the ruins of El Mirador loom like a forgotten kingdom. This wasn't just another Mayan city, it was a sprawling metropolis, its pyramids dwarfing even Tikal's grandest temples, built centuries before the classical Mayan Golden Age. At its peak, around 200 years before the Common Era, El Mirador housed over 100,000 people, its skyline dominated by the towering La Danta complex, a pyramid so massive that its volume surpasses Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet by the year 150, this powerhouse of the pre-classic Mayan world was abandoned, leaving behind silent plazas and pyramids swallowed by vines. What could make a civilization walk away from such grandeur? El Mirador's scale hints at a political system far more centralized than archaeologists once believed possible for the ancient Mayans. Unlike later city-states that competed for power, El Mirador seems to have ruled over a vast network of satellite cities connected by elevated stone causeways stretching dozens of miles. These white roads, some as wide as modern highways, suggest a level of coordination that defies our understanding of Mayan governance. Imagine laborers moving through the jungle, transporting limestone blocks without beasts of burden, all under the command of rulers whose names we may never know. The city's sudden collapse deepens the enigma. Soil samples tell a story of environmental strain, deforestation, erosion, and dwindling water supplies. But other Mayan cities faced similar challenges and adapted. Why not El Mirador? Some researchers point to a more sinister clue: defensive walls built hastily in the city's final years. Was this the work of a paranoid elite or evidence of an uprising that shattered the old order? Then there's the art. Friezes at El Mirador depict the Mayan creation myth, the Popol Vuh, centuries before it appeared elsewhere. Twin heroes stand triumphant over gods of the underworld, their story carved in stucco for all to see. This wasn't just decoration, it was propaganda, a way to unite distant territories under a shared cosmology. The scale of these artworks suggests El Mirador didn't just control land, it manufactured belief. Nowhere is the city's ambition clearer than in its water management. In a region without rivers, El Mirador's engineers designed intricate reservoir systems to capture every drop of rain. These weren't just practical, they were ceremonial, turning the act of survival into a spectacle of power. When water flowed, it did so by the grace of kings. Today, reaching El Mirador requires a grueling jungle trek, as if the city still guards its secrets. Archaeologists using LiDAR technology have peeled back the canopy to reveal thousands of undiscovered structures, hinting that what we've uncovered is just the tip of a lost civilization's iceberg. The real mystery isn't why El Mirador fell, but how it rose in the first place and what its forgotten rulers might still teach us about the untapped potential of the ancient Mayan world. Among the treasures left behind by the Mayans, one stands out not for its gold or jade, but for its startling, vivid hue, a blue so luminous it still dazzles after centuries buried in the jungle. Unlike most ancient pigments that fade with time, this shade, now called Maya blue, clings stubbornly to temple walls, pottery, and even the bones of sacrificial victims. But its endurance isn't the real mystery. It's the fact that this color, a mesmerizing blend of sky and sea, shouldn't exist at all. The secret lies in its recipe, a fusion of science and spirituality. Modern chemists have identified the ingredients: indigo dye, extracted from the leaves of the annual plant, and a rare clay called palagorskite found in underground caves. But here's the twist: when heated together at just the right temperature, these materials undergo a molecular transformation. The indigo bonds with the clay's crystalline structure, creating a pigment that resists water, acid, and even modern solvents. Picture a 16th century Spanish conquistador scrubbing at a painted wall, frustrated as the blue refuses to fade under his brush. That durability wasn't an accident. The Mayans weren't just making paint, they were engineering a color meant to outlast time itself. Why go to such lengths for blue? In the Mayan world, this shade wasn't decorative, it was divine. Associated with Chok, the rain god, and Hunhunapu, the maize deity, it symbolized life-giving water and the sacred sky. Murals at sites like Bonampak show rulers adorned in blue garments, their bodies becoming conduits between earth and heaven. But the pigment's most haunting use was in sacrifice. Victims were painted head to toe in Maya blue before their hearts were offered to the gods, as if the color itself carried their souls upward. Even the tools of ritual, knives, altars, and incense burners were coated in it, transforming acts of violence into sacred ceremonies. The process of making the pigment might hold clues to its spiritual significance. Recent studies suggest the mixing and heating were rituals in themselves, performed in caves considered portals to the underworld. By infusing the clay with indigo under torchlight, artisans weren't just creating a color, they were capturing the essence of the cosmos in powdered form. Some researchers even speculate the blue's resistance to decay was intentional. a way to ensure offerings remained alive in the eyes of the gods long after the ceremonies ended. Yet for all we've uncovered, gaps remain. How did the Mayans discover this complex chemical process without modern tools? Why did the knowledge vanish after their collapse, leaving later cultures unable to replicate it? And most intriguingly, what other lost technologies might still lie hidden in their artworks, waiting for us to decipher their secrets? Maya blue isn't just a pigment. It's a testament to a civilization that saw no boundary between the physical and the divine, where even a splash of color could bridge the gap between mortals and the infinite. Stretching across the jungle like ghostly ribbons, the Mayan Civilization, or white roads cut through dense forest and swamp with an almost unnatural straightness. Built from crushed limestone and packed earth, these elevated causeways connected cities sometimes dozens of miles apart, their surfaces gleaming pale under the moon. But what's truly baffling isn't just their existence, it's the sheer ambition of their construction. Without metal tools, wheels, or beasts of burden, how did the Mayans engineer highways so precise that some deviate less than a foot over their entire length? And more importantly, why take the Grand Sakbi linking Kaaba to Yaxuna, a 62-mile artery running arrows straight through unforgiving terrain? Modern surveys reveal it wasn't just a path, it was a feat of leveling with drainage systems to prevent flooding and retaining walls to combat erosion. The labor required would have been staggering. Think thousands of workers hauling limestone by hand, aligning roads using nothing but sight lines and stars. But here's the catch. Archaeologists find surprisingly little evidence of trade goods along these routes. Unlike Rome's roads built to move armies and merchants, Mayan Civilization seem oddly clean of commercial debris. So if not for trade, what compelled this civilization to invest so much in these shimmering trails? One clue lies in the road's sacred geometry. Many align with celestial events: the rise of Venus at Uxmal, the solstice sunrise at Izamul. Others lead directly to ceremonial caves or holy cenotes, suggesting pilgrims once walked these paths during rituals. At certain points, the Civilization even mimic the Milky Way's path across the sky, turning the jungle into a mirror of the cosmos. Imagine processions of priests in feathered regalia, their footsteps echoing on white stone as they reenacted mythic journeys between worlds. Yet there's a darker possibility. Some Civilization terminate abruptly at fortified walls, hinting they might have been wartime supply lines. In the murals of Bonampak, conquering armies march along similar roads, their prisoners dragged in chains. Could these pristine highways have doubled as tools of empire, allowing kings to project power across vast distances? The most tantalizing theory comes from recent LiDAR scans revealing hidden Civilization beneath the jungle roads that don't connect major cities at all. Instead, they trace intricate patterns between minor shrines and lonely pyramids, like spokes on a wheel with no clear hub. Were these spiritual pathways meant only for the gods? Or perhaps the Mayans saw roads differently than we do, not as means to an end, but as sacred creations in their own right, their very straightness a defiance of chaos, their whiteness a bridge between earth and sky. What's certain is that the Civilization weren't just practical. They were statements of power, of faith, of a civilization's refusal to be bound by the wilderness they inhabited. And that's the real mystery, not how they built these roads, but why they poured their soul into trails that led not just to places, but to something far more profound. To the Mayans, Venus wasn't just a bright dot in the sky, it was a celestial warlord, its movements dictating when to raise spears or kneel in prayer. The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Mayan books, devotes 6 full pages to tracking this planet with mathematical precision that would make modern astronomers blink. Their calculations nailed Venus's 584-day cycle to within minutes of what we know today, a feat achieved without telescopes, just naked eyes and obsidian-sharp minds watching the night for generations. But accuracy wasn't the point, survival was. In Mayan cosmology, Venus wasn't a planet, it was Kukulkan's fiery twin, a being that shifted identities like a mask. When it appeared as the morning star, they called it Chak-Ek, the great star, a harbinger of chaos demanding blood. Murals show spears tipped with Venus symbols piercing captives' chests, their sacrifice timed to the planet's rise. The Dresden Codex even includes a 4-page war almanac, listing optimal attack dates based on Venus's position. This wasn't superstition, it was strategy. Launching raids under Venus's influence meant fighting with cosmic backing, demoralizing enemies who believed the gods themselves favored your blade. Yet there's a haunting duality. The same planet that sanctioned war also guided peace. As the evening star, Venus transformed into a benevolent entity called No-Ek, its light governing agriculture and royal coronations. Kings timed their ascensions to its cycles, embedding their rule in celestial order. At Uxmal, the governor's palace aligned so precisely that Venus would have illuminated the throne during key transitions, bathing the ruler in otherworldly light. The real shock lies in how they achieved such precision. The Dresden tables account for Venus's irregular movements using correction factors that anticipate modern calculus. One sequence shows them tracking 8 Venus cycles, a span of nearly 100 years with errors smaller than a day. How some scholars believe Mayan astronomers used long-term observational records etched into architecture. At Chichen Itza, the Caracol Observatory's narrow windows frame Venus's extremes, suggesting generations of priests logged its positions like celestial accountants. But beneath the math lingers a deeper question. Did they predict Venus's motions, or did they believe they were negotiating with them? Glyphs describe the planet descending to Earth during rituals, as if its path weren't orbital mechanics but a conversation. Perhaps that's the true genius of the Mayan astronomers. They didn't just observe the cosmos. They spoke its language, turning cold calculations into a dialogue between Earth and stars. And in that dialogue, they found not just answers but meaning, a way to weave their wars, their harvests, and their very lives into the fabric of the sky. Deep in the Mayan oral tradition, whispers persist of a glorious city swallowed by the sea, a place of towering temples and wise rulers, lost beneath the waves in a single cataclysmic night. The myth echoes Plato's tale of Atlantis, but this isn't Greek philosophy. It's a story carved into the memories of coastal Mayan communities, passed down through generations. Could this legend hold a kernel of truth? Recent discoveries suggest the answer might lie not in fantasy, but in the restless tides of history. Along the Yucatan's eastern shores, archaeologists have uncovered eerie evidence of sudden abandonment. At sites like Cholum and Xcaret, structures stand half-finished, tools left where they were dropped, as if workers fled mid-task. Soil cores tell a chilling story. Layers of saltwater sediment sandwiched between habitation zones, pointing to violent inundations. One theory points to a mega tsunami around the year 1000, possibly triggered by a distant underwater landslide or meteor impact. Imagine a wall of water surging inland, swallowing ports whole, leaving survivors to recount the horror in tales that hardened into legend over centuries. But some researchers propose a slower, more insidious culprit: rising seas. Studies of coastal cave formations show the Caribbean rose nearly 3 feet between 800 and 1200, a period overlapping with the collapse of key Mayan trade hubs. Cities built just inches above sea level would have watched helplessly as saltwater poisoned their wells and drowned their fields. The Atlantis myth might not describe a single event, but a creeping disaster that unfolded over lifetimes, each generation retreating further inland as the water chased them. Yet the most tantalizing clue comes from the murals of San Gervasio, where artists depicted a city half-submerged, its temples crumbling into a turquoise void. Accompanying glyphs speak of the Place of Reeds, a prosperous capital punished by the rain god Chok for its arrogance. Could this be a distorted memory of a real metropolis, now submerged off the coast of Belize? Underwater surveys there have revealed linear formations resembling paved roads and rectangular platforms too regular to be natural. But without definitive artifacts, the site remains in limbo, caught between myth and potential revelation. What makes this mystery so compelling isn't just the hunt for a physical city. It's the realization that the Mayans, like all civilizations, grappled with the fragility of their world. Whether swallowed by a single catastrophe or eroded by the tides of time, their Atlantis stands as a haunting metaphor, a reminder that even the mightiest stone can be humbled by nature's whims. And that's the real lesson lurking beneath the waves. Sometimes legends outlast the cities that inspired them, carried forward on the currents of collective memory. Among the most tantalizing artifacts tied to the Mayans are the crystal skulls, translucent carvings so perfect they seem to pulse with an otherworldly glow. Legend claims these objects were crafted thousands of years ago, their smooth surfaces shaped by tools beyond ancient capabilities, some even said to whisper secrets or glow under moonlight. But when archaeologists began examining them closely, they uncovered a truth stranger than fiction. Nearly all known crystal skulls were modern fakes. The real mystery, one or two refused to fold neatly into that explanation, leaving cracks in the story wide enough for doubt to seep through. The most famous, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, surfaced in the 1920s under murky circumstances. Adventurer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges claimed his daughter found it beneath a collapsed altar in Belize, though records show he likely purchased it at a London auction. What's undeniable is its craftsmanship, carved from a single block of quartz with a detachable jawbone that moves seamlessly, a feat modern jewelers struggle to replicate without fractures. Under magnification, experts found no tool marks, suggesting it was painstakingly polished over generations, perhaps with sand and water. But here's the catch: quartz rates a 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, tougher than steel. Without industrial tools, how could anyone achieve such precision? Rival theories abound. Some researchers propose the skulls were colonial-era hoaxes, crafted to feed European obsession with the exotic. Others argue a handful, like the Smithsonian's massive crystal skull, show traces of wheel polishing, a technique introduced after Spanish conquest. Yet when scientists examined microscopic wear patterns, a few specimens displayed anomalies. The Paris skull, for instance, bears striations inconsistent with modern tools, hinting at a lost grinding method. Even more puzzling, some show optical quirks. Under certain light, their hollow eye sockets project beams that align with celestial events, like the zenith sun over Chichen Itza. Coincidence or deliberate engineering? The Mayans themselves offer no clear answers. No skulls appear in their art or codices, and no excavated burial sites have yielded similar relics. But their obsession with crystals is well documented. Jade, quartz, and obsidian adorned royal tombs believed to channel spiritual energy. Healers used crystal lenses to focus sunlight for rituals, and the Popol Vuh describes stones of vision that granted kings communion with ancestors. Could the skulls be outliers of this tradition, ceremonial objects so sacred they were hidden from record? Perhaps the greatest twist came in 2008, when the British Museum and Smithsonian subjected their skulls to electron microscopy. Results confirmed most were 19th century fakes carved with rotary tools. But the tests also revealed something unexpected. A few specimens contained microscopic algae fossils embedded deep in the quartz, proving the raw crystal formed millions of years before modern forgers existed. These skulls weren't ancient Mayan, but they weren't recent either, leaving their origins dangling between fraud and enigma. So where does that leave us? The crystal skulls are a palimpsest of human fascination, layered with equal parts deception and genuine wonder. Whether hoaxes or holy relics, they reflect something timeless, not just about the Mayans, but about us. Our hunger for mystery, our willingness to believe, and the blurred line where history ends and legend begins. And that's the real magic of the skulls, not what they are, but what they make us imagine. While the southern Mayan heartland crumbled into silence around the year 900, a peculiar reversal of fortune unfolded in the north. Cities like Chichen Itza, Uxmal, and Koba didn't just survive. They flourished, their pyramids rising higher, their plazas bustling with a vitality that defied the collapse elsewhere. This wasn't just resilience, it was a reinvention. But what sparked this northern renaissance while the south lay abandoned? The answer might lie in a combination of desperate adaptation, ruthless pragmatism, and a cultural alchemy that transformed crisis into opportunity. One compelling theory points to mass migration. As drought and strife ravaged southern cities, displaced populations could have streamed northward, bringing not just numbers but knowledge. Evidence for this appears in architectural styles. Chichen Itza's iconic step pyramid, El Castillo, bears striking similarities to structures in distant Guatemala, as if southern architects left their fingerprints on northern stone. Artifacts tell a similar story. Jade from the Motagua Valley, obsidian from the highlands, materials once traded through southern networks now appearing in northern tombs. But migration alone doesn't explain the North's golden age. Something else shifted: power dynamics. Enter the Itza, a mysterious faction whose name became synonymous with Chichen Itza itself. Unlike the divine kings of the south who ruled as godlike figures, the Itza seem to have embraced a council-based governance, less centralized, more adaptable. Murals depict assemblies of nobles debating rather than solitary rulers decreeing, a system better suited to turbulent times. This wasn't just political innovation, it was survival strategy. While southern cities crumbled under the weight of royal excess, their kings demanding ever grander monuments despite failing crops, the North may have redistributed power, sharing the burden of leadership during crisis. Warfare likely accelerated the transformation. Northern cities didn't just absorb migrants, they conquered rivals, absorbing their strengths. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza yielded treasures from across Mesoamerica, gold discs from Panama, turquoise from the Aztec realm, proof of a trade network stretching far beyond the Mayan world. But these weren't just economic links, they were lifelines. Where the South had relied on rain-fed agriculture, the North tapped into vast groundwater systems, constructing intricate canals and reservoirs. Their secret weapon, the humble Cholton, bottle-shaped cisterns that stored rainwater, turning survival into an engineering triumph. Yet the North's success carried the seeds of its own undoing. By the 12th century, Chichen Itza too began to wane, its dominance usurped by newer powers like Mayapan. Perhaps the lesson isn't why the North thrived, but why any civilization endures at all, through a mix of luck, brutality, and the willingness to rewrite the rules when the old ones crumble. The northern lowlands didn't just outlast the collapse, they reimagined what it meant to be Mayan, leaving behind a legacy as enigmatic as it was brilliant. In the shadowy corners of Mayan archaeology, a handful of artifacts have sparked debates that teeter between academic scrutiny and wild speculation. Take the famous sarcophagus lid of King Pakal, discovered deep within Paleng's Temple of the Inscriptions. To some, the intricate carving shows the ruler reclining beneath a sacred tree, a classic Mayan depiction of the afterlife, but to others, it's a smoking gun Pakal crouched inside what looks unmistakably like a spacecraft, hands-on controls surrounded by flames and machinery. The internet buzzes with theories: ancient astronauts, lost technology, or even interdimensional travel. Yet strip away the hype and you're left with a far more fascinating question. How did a civilization without wheels or metal tools conjure images that, centuries later, would feel ripped from a sci-fi novel? The truth, as always, lies in context. The Mayan cosmos was a place of layered realities, where gods and mortals moved between worlds not through technology but through ritual. Pakal's spaceship closely aligns with descriptions from the Popol Vuh, where heroes navigate the underworld in celestial canoes, their journeys marked by twisting serpents and cosmic trees. The flames around him, likely stylized representations of the Milky Way, which the Mayans saw as a shimmering road for spirits. Even the so-called control panel beneath his fingers mirrors glyphs found in birth scenes, symbolizing the threshold between life and death. What reads as futuristic to us was deeply mythological to them, a visual language misunderstood across time. But not all alien artifacts are so easily explained. In the 1950s, a cache of small, stylized figurines was unearthed near Jalisco, Mexico, some with elongated heads and wide, almond-shaped eyes, others gripping strange, unidentifiable objects. Dubbed the Mayan astronaut statuettes, they became exhibit for ancient contact theories. Skeptics argue these were likely ceremonial objects or toys, their odd proportions reflecting artistic convention rather than extraterrestrial encounters. Yet intriguingly, similar figures appear in Capon stelae, their oversized helmets resembling diving gear. Could these be depictions of gods emerging from watery underworlds or something more enigmatic? The real twist comes when you examine Mayan knowledge of the stars. Their astronomical precision predicting eclipses, tracking Venus, was so advanced it feels almost out of place. Did they develop this expertise independently, or were they, as some theorists suggest, preserving wisdom from a forgotten precursor civilization? The Dresden Codex contains tables calculating lunar cycles with eerie accuracy, while murals at Bonampak show rulers clad in costumes mimicking celestial bodies. If you squint, it's easy to see how modern eyes might mistake symbolism for something more technological. Perhaps the most compelling argument against the ancient alien narrative is the Mayans' own words. Glyphs describe their deities not as visitors from the stars, but as forces woven into nature, sun and storm, maze and death. The spaceships are spirit boats, the helmets ritual masks. What we interpret as futuristic, they understood as sacred. Still, the persistence of these theories speaks to something deeper, our own discomfort with the idea that a primitive culture could achieve such sophistication without outside help. The greatest mystery isn't whether the Mayans met aliens, it's why we're so reluctant to believe they could soar so high on their own. Imagine a number system so advanced it could plot the cosmos, yet written with just 3 symbols, a shell, a dot, and a bar. The Mayans didn't just count, they crafted mathematical poetry, embracing concepts that would take Europe centuries to adopt. At the heart of their genius lay 2 revolutionary ideas, zero and a base 20 system, tools so powerful they unlocked celestial secrets we're still unraveling today. Zero wasn't just a placeholder for the Mayans, it was a philosophical leap. Unlike the Greeks or Romans, who saw emptiness as a void to be feared, Mayan scribes treated zero as a dynamic force, a pivot between worlds. In their decimal base 20 system, dots stood for ones, bars for fives, and a shell glyph for zero, allowing calculations that boggle the mind. Picture a farmer counting cacao beans. 4 dots stacked vertically made 20, but add a shell beneath them and suddenly you're dealing with 400. Another tier, that's 8,000. This wasn't just arithmetic, it was a ladder to the infinite. Their astronomy reveals the system's true brilliance. The Dresden Codex tracks Venus's orbit with a margin of error smaller than a day per century. To achieve this, Mayan mathematicians operated with numbers in the millions, calculating lunar cycles across epochs longer than recorded history. One inscription at Quirigua records a date spanning 63 million years, a timescale so vast it rivals modern geology. How their long count calendar treated time as a nested series of cycles, each multiplying by 20. Days kin, month unal, years ton, and so on up to the allot and 23 billion days. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how they used this system, it's why it vanished. When Spanish chroniclers arrived, they dismissed Mayan texts as pagan nonsense, burning codices that might have held advanced equations. But the deeper tragedy lies in the disconnect between theory and survival. A civilization that could measure the stars couldn't prevent its own collapse. Droughts, warfare, and political fragmentation shattered the network supporting their intellectual elite. As cities fell, the guardians of this knowledge, scribes who spent decades memorizing celestial tables, likely took their secrets to forgotten graves. What survived hints at what we lost. The Madrid Codex contains a multiplication table for the number 260, key to the sacred Tzolk'in calendar. Modern scholars needed supercomputers to verify its accuracy, yet Mayan scribes computed it with shells and sticks. Their math wasn't just a tool, it was a language, one that spoke of time as a living entity, of numbers as bridges between earth and sky. And that's the real tragedy, not that their knowledge was lost, but that we'll never hear the full conversation. Among the tangled vines of Mayan history, few threads are more fascinating or more debated than the royal bloodlines that wove their way through cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Calakmul. These weren't just kings, they were living gods, their authority etched into stone stelae with titles like Holy Lord of the Banana Place or He Who Summons the Ancestors. But behind the grandeur lay a fragile web of alliances, betrayals, and a dangerous obsession with purity, one that may have hastened their civilization's unraveling. Take the dynasty of Tikal, where rulers traced their lineage back to a mythical founder named Yax-Ab-Zuk, a figure said to have descended from the stars. His successors didn't just inherit a throne, they inherited divinity. Their blood considered the literal conduit between mortals and the gods. Glyphs describe kings performing bloodletting rituals, slicing their tongues or genitals to feed sacred flames with their life force. The message was clear, only those born of the royal line could keep the cosmos in balance. But this divine mandate came at a cost. Intermarriage wasn't just tradition, it was strategy. To maintain their sacred blood, royal families turned inward, marrying cousins, siblings, even half-siblings. At Palenque, King Kayanish-Janub Pakal married his own mother, or so some glyphs suggest, while his son cemented alliances by wedding women from distant cities, only to see their offspring inherit conflicting loyalties. The result, a genetic bottleneck that left rulers increasingly frail. Skeletons from royal tombs show startling deformities, club feet, spinal curvatures hinting at generations of inbreeding. The gods chosen were literally crumbling under the weight of their own pedigree. Power struggles turned lethal. The murals of Bonampak depict a royal court draped in jade, but also in paranoia, nobles whispering behind feathered fans, assassins lurking in moonlit temples. At Calakmul, rulers waged star wars against Tikal, not just for land, but to capture rival kings for sacrificial altars. Victory wasn't complete until you'd spilled your enemy's divine blood, proving your own lineage superior. One stela records a Tikal queen, Lady Six Sky, marching into Dos Pilas to install her infant son as ruler, a puppet king barely weaned. Politics wasn't just dirty, it was dynastic Darwinism. Yet the system's greatest flaw was its inflexibility. When droughts choked the land and commoners starved, kings doubled down on rituals, insisting more blood would bring rain. When rivals rose, they tightened their grip on purity, shutting out fresh alliances. By the time collapse came, many royal lines had become echoes of themselves, physically weak, politically isolated, their divine right now a curse. The irony, their obsession with immortality may have sealed their fate. In trying to preserve the sacred, they forgot the practical. A civilization that once thrived on adaptability now knelt before brittle tradition. The lesson written in their bones isn't just about power. It's about the peril of confusing legend with survival, and that's a warning that echoes far beyond the jungle. Deep in the steamy jungles of the Yucatan, archaeologists have uncovered ceramic vessels stained with residues that tell a startling story, traces of substances like bufotenin, a potent hallucinogen derived from toad venom, alongside nicotine concentrations 10 times stronger than modern cigarettes. These weren't recreational drugs. To the Mayans, psychotropic plants and animal toxins were sacred keys, unlocking doors to realms where gods whispered and ancestors walked. But as we piece together the rituals surrounding these substances, a darker question emerges. Were these visionary experiences genuinely spiritual, or were they a calculated tool to reinforce the power of kings and priests? The evidence is etched into murals and buried in tombs. At Bonampak, frescoes show nobles adorned in elaborate costumes, their pupils dilated as they inhale smoke from tubes filled with potent tobacco blends. In Palenque, a stone relief depicts a queen holding an enema syringe, a method scholars believe delivered hallucinogenic concoctions directly into the bloodstream for faster, more intense effects. Even the humble stingless bee revered by the Mayans played a role. Its honey, when fermented with tree bark, created balshe, a ritual brew that induced trance-like states. But the most chilling clues come from the remains themselves. Skeletal analyses reveal elite individuals with telltale grooves filed into their teeth, perfect for holding hallucinogenic pellets during ceremonies, allowing slow absorption through the gums. Why go to such extremes? The Mayan cosmos was multilayered, with the underworld, earth, and heavens constantly interacting. Priests and rulers didn't just communicate with the divine, they were expected to journey there, returning with prophecies and blessings. The Popol Vuh describes heroes like the twins descending into Xibalba, navigating its trials with supernatural aid. Hallucinogens may have been the vehicle for such voyages, dissolving the barrier between worlds. One theory suggests the famous vision serpent carving serpents with gaping mouths from which gods emerge represent the hallucinations experienced during these rituals, where the boundaries of reality twisted and deities materialized before the worshipper's eyes. Yet there's a persuasive counterargument: social control. Imagine a peasant weary from drought, witnessing their king convulse in a drug-induced frenzy, speaking in tongues as he channeled the rain god Chok. The psychological impact would be profound, reinforcing the ruler's divine mandate. At sites like Kapon, archaeologists found communal drinking vessels laced with psychotropic compounds, hinting at group ceremonies where entire populations might have been guided or manipulated through shared altered states. Even the timing was strategic. Many rituals coincided with celestial events like Venus's rise, leveraging the awe of cosmic alignment to amplify the drug's effects. The truth likely straddles both interpretations. For the Mayans, the spiritual and political weren't separate realms. A priest's hallucination wasn't just personal revelation, it was statecraft, a way to bind communities through shared mystical experience. Modern studies of psychedelics show they can induce profound feelings of unity and transcendence, powerful glue for a civilization under stress, but the cost was steep. Frequent use of toxins like toad venom could lead to addiction or psychosis, and skeletal evidence suggests some elites suffered chronic health issues linked to prolonged exposure. What lingers isn't just the question of intent, but the sheer sophistication of their practices. The Mayans didn't stumble upon these substances blindly. They curated them, combining plants and chemicals to fine-tune their effects like alchemists of consciousness. In their hands, a toad's venom wasn't poison, it was a passport to the beyond, and perhaps a leash to hold the mortal world in thrall. The line between enlightenment and control blurs here, leaving us to wonder, did these rituals uplift the Mayans, or did they become prisoners of their own visions? The jungles of the Maya hold more than ruins, they cradle silent cities that whisper of sudden mass exodus. While drought often takes the blame for their collapse, the sheer scale of abandonment hints at something more complex than a single environmental catastrophe. Entire metropolises emptied over decades, leaving behind half-eaten meals on pottery shards and tools dropped mid-task, as if workers simply walked away one afternoon and never returned. If drought was the sole culprit, why did some cities in wetter regions also fail? And why, in places where water remained plentiful, did the Mayans leave behind perfectly functional reservoirs? The truth may lie in a cascade of disasters, each feeding into the next like dominoes, tipping an entire civilization into oblivion. soil exhaustion offers one compelling piece of the puzzle. The Mayans practiced slash and burn agriculture, clearing forests to plant maize in nutrient-rich ash, but continuous cycles stripped the land bare. Soil analyses reveal layers of sediment where fertile earth gave way to sterile clay, a telltale sign of erosion. At Capon, researchers found corn pollen abruptly disappearing from soil records, replaced by invasive weeds. The land itself was crying out. Yet while this explains rural collapse, it doesn't fully account for cities with sophisticated terracing and irrigation. Unless perhaps the very systems designed to save them became traps. Intricate canal networks may have inadvertently poisoned fields with stagnant water, breeding malaria-carrying mosquitoes. Then there's the specter of rebellion. Glyphs from the late classic period hint at unrest kings with titles like He Who Crushes the People or Master of the Lash. Murals at Bonampak depict nobles torturing bound captives, their blood pooling on temple steps. For peasants already crushed by labor demands and food shortages, these displays of brutality may have been the final straw. At some sites, stelae of rulers were deliberately defaced, their noses broken in ritual humiliation. Could the Mayan collapse have been, in part, a revolution? The archaeological record holds eerie clues, palaces burned from the inside out, suggesting targeted attacks rather than foreign invasion. Disease might have been the silent accomplice. While no mass graves confirm epidemics, European accounts describe plagues racing through indigenous populations after contact. Could an earlier, unrecorded pandemic have crept along trade routes? The Mayans were avid travelers, with cacao and jade moving between cities. A single merchant carrying sickness could have unwittingly ignited a wildfire of death. Some researchers point to a sudden drop in pottery production at key cities. Fewer people meant fewer hands to craft vessels. Others note an uptick in child burials during the collapse era, often a sign of societal distress. The most haunting possibility, a perfect storm. Picture this: drought shrivels crops, forcing desperate farmers to overwork dwindling fields. Starving commoners turn on kings whose bloodletting rituals fail to bring rain. Trade collapses, and with it the flow of goods that once buffered hard times. Then, as social order frays, disease sweeps through malnourished populations. No single blow felled the Maya, it was death by 1,000 cuts, each one deepening the next. Yet even this theory stumbles on exceptions. Some cities, like Lamani, thrived long after the classic collapse, adapting where others perished. Their survival suggests the Maya weren't doomed, just pushed beyond a breaking point. The real lesson isn't in why they fell, but in how delicately even the grandest civilizations balance on the edge of chaos. Their abandoned cities stand as monuments not to inevitability, but to the fragile web of nature, power, and human endurance, a web we're still learning to navigate today. Long before the Mayan cities rose to prominence, another civilization dominated Mesoamerica, the Olmecs, often called the mother culture of the region. Their colossal stone heads, carved from volcanic rock with striking, almost otherworldly features, stand as silent sentinels of a society that thrived over 3,000 years ago. But what connects these enigmatic people to the Mayans? The answer lies in clues scattered across jungles and buried in artifacts, pointing to a relationship far deeper than mere coincidence. At first glance, the contrasts are stark. The Olmecs flourished along the swampy Gulf Coast around 1,200 years before the Common Era, while the Mayan Golden Age bloomed centuries later in the dense forests of the Yucatan. Yet dig deeper and the threads become undeniable. The Mayan writing system, for instance, once thought to be entirely original, bears uncanny similarities to early Olmec glyphs. The La Mojara Stela, an Olmec artifact, displays symbols that resemble Mayan script, suggesting the seeds of their written language may have been planted long before. Even their shared obsession with jade, a stone with no practical use but immense spiritual significance, hints at a cultural handoff, but the most compelling evidence lies in their sacred cities. The Olmec site of La Venta features a pyramid aligned with celestial events, much like Mayan temples. Both cultures oriented their structures to track the movements of Venus and the solstices, as if following the same cosmic blueprint. Even the iconic Mayan ball game, Poc a Toc, appears to have Olmec root stone reliefs at El Manotti depict players in nearly identical poses, their ritualistic sport preserved across millennia. The question isn't just whether the Mayans borrowed from the Olmecs, it's how much deeper the connection goes. Some scholars argue the Olmecs weren't just an influence but a direct ancestral culture, their knowledge passed down through elite lineages or migrating priest-kings. Excavations at Cebal, a Mayan site, revealed ceremonial greenstone axes nearly identical to Olmec artifacts, buried centuries after the Olmec decline. Were these treasured heirlooms or proof of a living tradition? Yet mysteries linger. The Olmecs vanished long before the Mayans peaked, their cities abandoned under circumstances just as puzzling as the collapse that would later claim their successors. Did the Mayans inherit more than just art and astronomy from them? Could they have also inherited their vulnerabilities, the same ecological pressures or political fractures that doomed the mother culture? The truth may lie in the gaps between civilizations. The Olmecs didn't just fade away, they transformed, their ideas carried forward by those who remembered. The Mayans didn't merely copy, they built upon a foundation they couldn't have known was so fragile. And that's the real lesson here. Civilizations don't rise in isolation. They stand on the shoulders of giants who in time become little more than whispers in stone. Deep beneath the tangled roots of the ceiba tree, the Mayan axis of the world lay Xibalba, a realm so vividly described in the Popol Vuh that explorers centuries later would gasp upon finding its real-life counterparts. This wasn't just mythology etched into bark paper codices. It was a blueprint, a chillingly accurate map of the labyrinthine cave systems where the Mayans ventured to commune with the dead. The Popol Vuh recounts Xibalba as a place of twisting passages, rivers of blood, and houses of torment, each feature mirrored in the sprawling underground networks like Acton Tunishil Muknal in Belize, where stalactites dagger down like the bone ceilings described in the text, and crystals glint like the eyes of the underworld's lords. The parallels are too precise to dismiss as coincidence. In the Popol Vuh, the hero twins descend into Xibalba through a treacherous cave, confronting tests in chambers named House of Gloom and House of Knives. Modern archaeologists have uncovered caves like Naj Tunish in Guatemala, their walls adorned with paintings of bound captives and deities, their floors littered with shattered pottery ritual, killings of vessels to release their spiritual essence. One chamber even holds a natural rock formation eerily resembling a stone throne, matching the text's description of the underworld ruler's court. These weren't just stories, they were sacred geographies with every stalagmite and pool woven into myth. But why venture into these claustrophobic depths? For the Mayans, caves weren't just symbolic, they were portals. The act of entering Xibalba physically was a form of cosmic theater. At Balancanch Cave in Mexico, priests left offerings of jade beads and child-sized footprints pressed into clay, reenacting the Popol Vuh's tale of the twins' journey. Skeletal remains found in these caves often show signs of ritual trauma, skulls fractured in ways that suggest deliberate sacrifice, their bodies positioned to face underground rivers believed to carry souls to the afterlife. The darkness wasn't empty, it was crowded with spirits waiting to be fed. The most haunting discovery came in 2018, when divers probing the Sac Acton cave system found a submerged shrine, a ceremonial dagger placed atop an altar of stalagmites surrounded by human bones. This grotesque tableau mirrored the Popol Vuh's House of Cold, where victims perished from magical frost. Even the cave's layout, a maze of flooded tunnels forcing explorers to swim past jagged rocks, echoes the text's River of Scorpions. The Mayans didn't just imagine their underworld, they built it stone by stone, drop by drop. Yet Xibalba's true power lay in its duality. While the Popol Vuh paints it as a place of fear, it was also one of renewal. Caves like Las Cuvas de Candelaria served as birthing sites where midwives brought newborns to be blessed by ancestral spirits. Kings underwent vision quests in these chambers, emerging to claim divine authority. The darkness wasn't just an end, it was a womb. This tension between terror and transcendence reveals the Mayan genius. Their underworld wasn't a passive backdrop for myth. It was an active participant in their cosmology, shaping politics, art, and survival. To decode Xibalba isn't just to understand a story, it's to walk, crawl, and swim through the shadows of a civilization that saw death not as an abyss, but as a mirror held up to life itself. Rising from the jungle floor like stone sentinels, the Mayan stelae stand frozen in time, their intricately carved faces staring blankly across centuries. These towering limestone slabs, some reaching over 30 feet high, were far more than decorative art. They were the billboards of their age, broadcasting carefully curated messages of power, divinity, and conquest. But peel back the layers of these stone narratives, and you'll find a tension between history and manipulation, where every glyph and portrait was a calculated move in a high-stakes game of royal legitimacy. Take the famous Stela 16 at Tikal, erected by King Jasor Chan Kayahuil in the year 712. At first glance, it commemorates his victory over archrival Calakmul. The king stands triumphant, his foot resting on a bound captive while celestial serpents coil overhead. But look closer, the captive is named Yuchok Kayok, or Claw of Fire, the same moniker borne by Calakmul's actual ruler. Yet archaeological records suggest this king outlived Jasor by decades. Was this a case of artistic license or outright deception? The stela's placement is equally strategic, directly facing the tomb of Jasor's father, as if to assure restless ancestors their lineage remained unbroken. These monuments weren't just personal boastings, they were territorial markers writ large. At Quirigah, the warlord Kayak Tilu Chan Yopot commissioned a series of stelae so massive, one weighs over 60 tons, that transporting them would have required hundreds of laborers. Their size wasn't practical, it was psychological. By erecting monoliths visible for miles, Quirigah declared its independence from Capon without firing a shot. The glyphs tell one story: divine sanction for his rule, but the subtext is clear: challenge us and you challenge the gods themselves. Yet the propaganda wasn't always persuasive. At some sites, stelae lie toppled, their faces deliberately defaced. In Tonana, fragments of a once glorious monument were repurposed as construction filler, a silent coup by later generations rejecting the old order. Even the materials betrayed vulnerabilities. Unlike Egyptian obelisks carved from durable granite, Mayan stelae used soft limestone vulnerable to erosion, perhaps a metaphor for power's fleeting nature. The most fascinating twist, these stone chronicles sometimes contradicted themselves. At Yaxchilan, Lady Kayabul Zuk appears on multiple stelae performing sacred bloodletting rites. But on lintel 24, she's a young bride, on lintel 25, an aged queen. The same woman, the same ritual, decades apart. Yet each carving presents the moment as immediate, as if time had folded to keep her forever at the peak of influence. So were they history or hype? The answer lies in between. Like modern politicians airbrushing photos or editing speeches, Mayan rulers understood truth was malleable. Their stelae were time capsules, yes, but also time machines, reshaping the past to control the future. And in that delicate dance between fact and fiction, we glimpse not just how they ruled, but how they desperately hoped to be remembered. Among the most puzzling artifacts ever excavated from Mayan sites are the so-called eccentric flints, delicate, intricately chipped blades shaped into swirling serpents, dancing deities, and even full scenes of mythic battles. Unlike practical tools, these obsidian masterpieces feature jagged, uneven edges and fragile protrusions that would shatter upon contact. Their craftsmanship borders on the impossible, some contain over 30 individual notches per inch, a precision that would challenge modern laser cutters. But their true mystery lies not in how they were made, but why. What purpose could these breathtaking yet utterly impractical objects have served? One prevailing theory casts them as sacred offerings. At the ruins of El Peruwaka, archaeologists uncovered a cache of these flints buried beneath a royal tomb, arranged in a starburst pattern around a jade mask. The positioning suggests ceremonial placement, perhaps as gifts to accompany a king into the afterlife. The Popol Vuh describes gods receiving sky blades as tribute, and some eccentric flints mirror these descriptions, their sinuous forms resembling lightning bolts or celestial serpents. Others bear glyphs naming specific rulers, leading scholars to speculate they were commissioned as one-of-a-kind royal heirlooms, their intricate designs encoding dynastic legends. Yet there's a darker possibility. Many flints depict bound captives or decapitation scenes, their obsidian surfaces stained with hematite pigment mimicking blood. At Dos Pilas, a flint shaped like a scorpion, an emblem of the underworld, was found clutched in a sacrificial victim's hand. Could these have been ritual weapons, never meant to cut flesh but to symbolically kill during ceremonies? Experimental archaeologists note that when struck, certain flints produce harmonic tones, suggesting they might have been used in auditory rituals to summon spirits. The most mind-bending examples defy categorization entirely. A flint from Capon unfolds like a fractal. Zoom in on what appears to be a simple warrior, and you'll find his headdress composed of miniature repeating faces, each with expressions subtly shifting from joy to agony. Another, discovered in Belize, serves as an astronomical map, its jagged edges aligning with Venus's positions over a 20-year cycle when held at specific angles to moonlight. These aren't just artifacts, they're multidimensional puzzles blending art, science, and spirituality in ways we're only beginning to decipher. Perhaps the answer lies in what they demanded of their creators. Producing even a single eccentric flint required months of painstaking work, with craftsmen risking fatal shattering at every tap. The very act of creation may have been a form of devotion, the artist's blood mingling with the stone as they chipped away imperfections. In a civilization where bloodletting opened portals to the divine, these flints, fragile yet enduring, beautiful yet ominous, could have been the ultimate expression of faith. Objects too sacred to use, too powerful to ignore. Their silence speaks volumes, reminding us that some mysteries were never meant to be solved, only revered. Picture this: a merchant in a bustling Mayan marketplace haggles not over gold or silver, but over small, wrinkled beans that could fit in the palm of your hand. Cacao, the source of chocolate, wasn't just a treat for the Maya, it was cold, hard cash. These beans traded hands for everything from baskets of maize to parcels of land, even paying tribute to kings. But how did something so humble become the backbone of an economy? And why was it worth more than jade in the eyes of an entire civilization? The answer lies at the intersection of taste, ritual, and sheer ingenuity. The mechanics of this chocolate economy were surprisingly sophisticated. Historical accounts describe meticulous quality control. Beans were counted in precise units, with standardized bags holding exactly 8,000 beans, enough to purchase a canoe. Counterfeiters risked gruesome punishment. Spanish records note that some tried passing off carved clay beans as real cacao, only to face execution. The beans' value wasn't arbitrary. Unlike coins, which derive worth from collective agreement, cacao had intrinsic value. It was portable, durable, and crucially divisible. Need change for a turkey. A handful of beans would do. Buying a slave, that'll cost 100 beans, please. Yet chocolate's role transcended commerce. In Mayan cosmology, cacao was a divine gift. The Popol Vuh tells of the god Huracan giving cacao to humanity after creation, its bitter pulp symbolizing the blood of sacrificial victims. Elite drinking vessels, often inscribed with glyphs reading Yukib Kakor, his or her cup of chocolate, reveal how deeply it was woven into identity. Royals sipped frothy, spiced chocolate during coronations, its foam mustache marking them as chosen. Warriors carried cacao pods into battle as rations, believing its energizing properties came from supernatural favor. Even death rituals involved chocolate. Archaeologists have found ceramic vessels stuffed with beans in noble tombs, provisions for the journey to Xibalba. The most fascinating twist, how cacao mirrored the tensions of Mayan society. While kings hoarded beans in vaults, peasants paid taxes with them. At Tikal, murals show merchants bowing before rulers, their offerings of cacao stacked like tribute bricks. This wasn't just trade, it was theater, reinforcing hierarchies through every transaction. Yet the system had vulnerabilities. Droughts could wipe out cacao crops, destabilizing entire regions. When the Spanish introduced metal coins, the Maya initially resisted. Why trust cold, lifeless discs when beans grew on trees, their worth rooted in divine order? What we're left with is more than an economic quirk. The Mayan chocolate currency reveals a world view where value wasn't abstract but tangible, tied to the earth, the gods, and the very rhythms of life. In their hands, a simple bean became a passport between worlds, proving that sometimes the sweetest treasures are those you can count. In the pitch-black depths of Mayan caves, where the air hummed with the flutter of unseen wings, lurked Camazotz, the bat god. This wasn't some gentle creature of the night. Carved reliefs depict him with the body of a man and the snarling face of a bat, his dagger-like claws outstretched as if ready to tear flesh from bone. To the Mayans, bats weren't just animals, they were omens, psychopomps guiding souls through the underworld, and Camazotz was their terrifying sovereign. But why would a civilization that revered the sun and Mays also worship a deity embodying darkness and blood? The answer lies in the duality of their world, where light couldn't exist without shadow and life demanded death. The bat god's origins stretch back to the shadowy corners of Mayan mythology. In the Popol Vuh, Camazotz appears as a guardian of Xibalba's House of Bats, where he decapitates one of the hero twins with a single slash of his wings. This wasn't just a cautionary tale, it was a reflection of very real dangers. The jungles of Mesoamerica teemed with vampire bats, whose stealthy nighttime attacks on livestock and occasionally humans left unnerved villagers whispering about supernatural predators. By personifying these fears into Camazotz, the Mayans transformed a natural threat into something they could ritually appease. Archaeological finds reveal just how far that appeasement went. At the cave site of Naj Tunish, glyphs describe rituals where priests donned bat-winged costumes, their ceremonies illuminated by flickering torches that cast monstrous shadows on the walls. Deeper in the cave, skeletal remains, some with vertebrae neatly separated from skulls, mirror the Popol Vuh's decapitation myth. But the most chilling evidence comes from Kapan, where a royal burial contained a jade pendant carved into Camazotz's likeness, placed deliberately over the deceased's heart. This wasn't just reverence, it was armor. The bat god could take life, but he could also protect it if properly bribed with blood. The cult of Camazotz reached its peak during times of crisis. During droughts or famines, when the sun seemed to abandon the world, his worship surged. Murals at San Bartolo show kings performing bloodletting rites before bat effigy censers, their offerings of royal blood a desperate bargain. Spare us the chaos of eternal night, and we'll feed you the red tide of our veins. Even the architecture played along. At Tonana, a temple's acoustics were engineered so that whispers at the altar echoed as bone-chilling screeches, a literal voice for the bat god. Yet Camazotz wasn't purely malevolent. In some glyphs, he appears as a midwife of sorts, his wings enveloping dying souls to usher them gently into the afterlife. Caves, his sacred domain, weren't just tombs, they were wombs where initiates underwent vision quests, emerging reborn. This duality captures the Mayan genius. They didn't shy from darkness. They named it, fed it, and in doing so, found a way to navigate the terrors lurking just beyond the firelight. the bat god wasn't just a monster, he was a mirror reflecting their deepest fears and their courage to face them. Beneath the dense canopy of the Yucatan jungle, the Mayans engineered a hidden network of survival that rivaled their grandest pyramids, an intricate water management system capable of sustaining millions in a land with no natural rivers. Where modern engineers might see an impossible challenge, the Mayans saw opportunity, transforming seasonal rainfall into a lifeline through sheer ingenuity. Their reservoirs, canals, and filtration systems were so advanced that some still function today, centuries after their creators vanished. But this mastery of water wasn't just technology, it was theology, politics, and ultimately, a cautionary tale of what happens when nature pushes back. Take Tikal, a city of towering temples that shouldn't have existed. Perched on limestone bedrock, it had no lakes or rivers to draw from. Yet LiDAR scans reveal a sprawling grid of reservoirs, some holding over 30 million gallons, fed by canals that redirected every drop of rain from paved plazas and temple rooftops. The genius lay in the details. Plaster-lined basins prevented seepage, while layers of quartz sand filtered impurities. But the real marvel was their understanding of balance. During the rainy season, excess water was diverted to replenish groundwater. In drought, they rationed with ceramic plugs and gravity-fed channels. This wasn't just engineering, it was hydrological poetry. Why then did these systems falter? The answer lurks in sediment cores drilled from ancient reservoir beds. Pollen analysis tells a grim story. As populations boomed, forests were cleared for farmland, exposing the delicate limestone cast to erosion. Silt choked reservoirs while deforestation disrupted rainfall patterns. At Capon, a city famed for its hieroglyphic staircase, sediment layers show reservoirs gradually filling with mud until around the year 800 they became shallow marshes. The Mayans didn't just lose water, they lost time. Without clean reserves, elites prioritized their own storage, fueling unrest. Glyphs from this period speak of broken vessels and thirsty lords, metaphors for a social contract crumbling alongside the infrastructure. Yet the deepest lesson lies in their adaptability and its limits. In the north, cities like Uxmal embraced radical solutions, constructing choltuns, bell-shaped cisterns lined with impermeable plaster, to capture rain in decentralized networks. Others turned to aguadas, natural sinkholes adapted into communal wells. For a time, these innovations worked, but climate shifts proved relentless. Isotope studies of stalagmites from Yok-Balam Cave reveal a series of megadroughts lasting decades, where even the most ingenious systems ran dry. The Mayans didn't fail from lack of skill. They were outmaneuvered by a changing world they couldn't predict. Modern parallels are impossible to ignore. Like the Maya cities today from Cape Town to Chen, I face water crises exacerbated by deforestation and overuse. Their ruins whisper a warning: no civilization, no matter how brilliant, is immune to nature's whims. But they also offer hope. In Guatemala's Patane region, archaeologists are reviving ancient Mayan techniques, restoring wetlands and terracing slopes to slow erosion, with remarkable success. The past, it seems, might hold the key to our future. The real mystery isn't how the Mayans managed water, it's whether we'll learn from their triumphs and their hubris before our own reservoirs run dry. Among the most enigmatic treasures ever pulled from Mayan ruins are discs of polished iron ore, some no larger than a palm, others as wide as a shield, with surfaces so flawless they reflect faces with eerie clarity. These weren't just mirrors, they were portals, status symbols, and possibly even tools to peer into the future. Crafted from magnetite or hematite, stones laden with cosmic significance, their purpose straddles the line between science and sorcery. How did a civilization without metalworking technology achieve such optical precision? And what did they believe they'd see staring back at them from those glossy, darkened surfaces? The craftsmanship alone defies expectation. Mayan artisans ground and polished these ores to near-perfect flatness using abrasives like quartz sand, then mounted them in ornate frames of jade or cedar. Some were concave, warping reflections like early funhouse mirrors, while others were so flat they could focus sunlight into beams hot enough to ignite tinder. At Teotihuacan, a mirror found in the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent still reflects light after 15 centuries, buried in dust, testament to a mastery of materials we're only beginning to appreciate. But practicality wasn't the point. Glyphs describe these objects as black suns or windows to the other world, suggesting their true value lay in what they revealed beyond the physical realm. Diving deeper, the mirror's ties to divination emerge. Spanish chroniclers recorded Mayan priests using polished stones to scry, interpreting distortions in reflections as messages from ancestors or gods. The Popol Vuh mentions seers gazing into smoke-blackened mirrors to foresee droughts or invasions. At Calakmul, archaeologists uncovered a mirror buried with a royal diviner, its surface etched with star maps, proof these weren't passive objects but active instruments of prophecy. Even their composition held meaning. Magnetite, naturally magnetic, may have symbolized the pull between worlds, while hematite's blood-red streak evoked sacrificial rites. Yet the most chilling theory casts these mirrors as literal gateways. Murals at Bonampak show rulers holding mirrors aloft during ceremonies, their reflections morphing into the faces of deities. At El Zotz, a tomb contained a mirror positioned to reflect the deceased king into the afterlife, its angle precisely calculated to catch the rising sun on the winter solstice. Were these devices meant to trap souls, summon spirits, or project consciousness across dimensions? Modern experiments reveal something uncanny. When polished magnetite mirrors are warmed by hands, their surfaces temporarily hold afterimages, a flickering effect that could make spectral visions feel terrifyingly real. Perhaps the truth lies in their duality. These objects weren't just tools, they were microcosms of the Mayan worldview, where boundaries between the tangible and the unseen were porous. A noblewoman admiring her headdress in a mirror might also glimpse her ancestors. A priest tracking Venus's reflection could believe he was touching the sky. In their polished depths, the Mayans didn't just see themselves. They saw a universe where nothing was truly solid, and every surface hid a door waiting to be opened. At Quirigá, under the oppressive jungle humidity, lies a scene frozen in time. A dozen massive stelae lie half-carved, their rough surfaces interrupted mid-design, tools still scattered around them as if the workers simply vanished between hammer strokes. These abandoned megaliths, some weighing over 60 tons, raise one of the most haunting questions in Mayan archaeology. What force could make an entire civilization drop their chisels and flee? The stones themselves tell a harrowing story. At Stela E, intended to be the tallest monument in the Mayan world, the base is polished to a mirror finish, its sides adorned with glyphs celebrating the reign of King Kayaktilu Chanyopot. But climb higher, and the carvings grow erratic, faces half-formed, inscriptions trailing off into nothing. Nearby, an unfinished altar bears deep grooves where workers began hollowing it out, only to abandon it mid-process. The most chilling detail, fire pits still holding charred remnants of the last meals eaten here, the ashes undisturbed for over 1,000 years. Dating these interruptions reveals a pattern. Pollen samples from the site's sediment layers show an abrupt shift around the year 800. Mahogany and cedar pollen, markers of a thriving jungle suddenly replaced by invasive weeds. This wasn't gradual decline, it was ecological collapse. At the same moment, isotopic analysis of human remains from nearby graves shows plummeting levels of nitrogen, a telltale sign of famine. The workers didn't just walk away, they were starving, but there's another layer. Some stelae show deliberate vandalism, not random erosion, but targeted blows to the faces of kings. Could this have been rebellion? Glyphs from this period speak of the burning of the scribe houses and the silence of the artisans. At Capon, just 50 miles away, a noble's tomb was defaced with graffiti depicting bound elites, their mouths sewn shut. The stones at Quirigá might not just be abandoned, they could be casualties of a society tearing itself apart. Then there's the geological wildcard. Core samples from the Motagua River, which once fed Quirigá's quarries, reveal layers of jagged obsidian shards dating to this era, evidence of a catastrophic flood or earthquake. One unfinished stela even lies cracked down the middle, as if split by an unimaginable force. Did the earth itself revolt, sending builders fleeing from falling rocks? What makes these megaliths so haunting isn't just their incompleteness, it's the glimpses of what they were meant to be. At the base of Stela U, partially covered in moss, you can still trace the outline of Kayaktilu's sandal pressing down on a bound captive, a declaration of eternal dominance. The irony stings. These monuments to permanence became testaments to impermanence, their very abandonment a more powerful message than any king could have carved. The stones didn't just stop being worked, they started working on us, whispering across centuries that no power, divine or mortal, lasts forever. Between the towering pyramids and sprawling plazas, the Mayans built archways that did more than connect spaces, they bridged worlds. These so-called doorways to the gods weren't mere architectural flourishes, they were carefully calibrated portals aligned with celestial events like solstices and equinoxes. At Disappearances, the most famous of these arches frames the rising sun perfectly on the spring and autumn equinoxes, flooding the temple courtyard with golden light in a spectacle that still draws crowds today. But was this precision astronomy or something more profound? To the Mayans, these moments when light pierced the threshold weren't just symbolic. They were invitations, literal openings where deities might step into the human realm. The science behind these alignments is staggering. At Uxmal, the great arch's curvature matches the sun's path during the summer solstice, casting shadows that slither like serpents along the pavement, a deliberate echo of Kukulkan's descent at Chichen Itza. Meanwhile, at Labna, a narrow corbelled arch acts as a celestial gun sight, its opening narrowing the sun's disk to a pinpoint on the winter solstice. These weren't accidents. Mayan architects used advanced mathematics to calculate angles down to arc minutes, embedding their understanding of time into stone. But the true marvel lies in how they transformed cold calculations into spiritual theater. Glyphs at Palenque describe these events as the breath of the gods, moments when the boundary between realms grew thin enough to whisper through. Archaeologists uncovering these arches often find hidden clues to their ritual use. Beneath the Great Arch of Kaaba, excavators discovered a buried cache of obsidian blades and jade beads, offerings left to charge the threshold with sacred energy. At Oxkentok, a vaulted passageway leads not to another room, but to a dead end adorned with carvings of deities mid-stride, as if frozen in the act of crossing over. Even the materials held meaning. Many arches incorporate quartz veins or iron-rich stones that shimmer in sunlight, creating the illusion that the gateway itself was alive with movement. Yet the most tantalizing evidence comes from colonial-era accounts. Spanish priests recorded Mayan elders speaking of white roads in the sky, paths illuminated by solstice light that spirits could walk upon. One chronicle describes a ceremony where participants, doped with hallucinogenic enemas, crawled through arches at dawn, believing their bodies became vessels for divine possession. Modern anthropologists have noted parallels with near-death experiences. The arch, like the horizon, may have symbolized a liminal space where consciousness could travel. So were these doorways functional or fantastical? The answer might be both. The Mayans saw no contradiction between the tangible and the transcendent. An arch that marked the sun's journey also marked a path for gods. A shadow's edge was both a calendar and a curtain, lifting to reveal the unseen. These structures challenge our modern divide between science and spirituality, suggesting that for the Maya, the universe wasn't a mechanism to be decoded, but a conversation, one where light itself was the language and every solstice a sentence waiting to be spoken. Hollywood blockbusters, best-selling novels, and late-night conspiracy forums all share an unlikely obsession: the Mayans. From the apocalyptic prophecies of 2012 to the treasure-hunting escapades of Indiana Jones, their civilization has become a shorthand for ancient mysticism and lost knowledge. But why does this particular culture, among all others, ignite our collective imagination so fiercely? The answer lies in a potent mix of genuine enigma and modern mythmaking, where the line between history and fantasy blurs into something irresistible. Take the infamous 2012 phenomenon. When the Mayan long count calendar's 13th backturn approached, pop culture latched onto the idea of an impending doomsday, despite scholars repeatedly clarifying that the calendar didn't predict catastrophe, but rather a cyclical renewal. Films like 2012 amplified this misunderstanding, depicting earthquakes swallowing cities and tsunamis obliterating continents. The irony: the Mayans themselves would have likely been baffled by the hysteria. Their writings celebrate time's cyclical nature, not its end. Yet the allure of an ancient civilization, predicting global collapse, tapped into our deepest anxieties, turning a misinterpretation into a cultural touchstone. Beyond disaster myths, Mayan symbolism saturates fantasy and sci-fi. The Tomb Raider series sends Lara Croft racing through lush jungles to unlock curses in hidden temples, while Black Panther's vibranium-infused Wakanda draws subtle parallels to Mesoamerican aesthetics, think stepped pyramids and jade-adorned warriors. Even video games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider weave in authentic glyphs and mythology, repackaging arcane knowledge as interactive adventure. These narratives thrive because they exploit a tantalizing what if the Mayans knew secrets we've forgotten? What if their gods weren't myths but misunderstood realities? Conspiracy theories take this further. Ancient astronaut enthusiasts point to the sarcophagus lid of King Pakal, insisting the carving depicts a spaceship cockpit rather than a cosmic tree. Others claim the Mayans inherited technology from extraterrestrials, citing their precise astronomy as proof of alien contact. Never mind that their celestial calculations were the product of meticulous observation. Our hunger for hidden truths outweighs historical nuance. The Mayans, with their abrupt collapse and cryptic glyphs, become blank screens for our wildest projections, yet the most enduring legacy might be subtler. Modern spiritual movements borrow heavily from Mayan cosmology, repurposing concepts like the sacred ceiba tree or the four cardinal directions into New Age practices. Yoga retreats in Cholum offer Mayan sound healings, while crystal shops sell jaguar spirit essences. This commercialization risks reducing a complex belief system to aesthetic trends, but it also speaks to something profound: a longing for connection to the natural world and cosmic cycles, something the Mayans mastered centuries ago. Perhaps their ultimate gift is the questions they leave us. In a world obsessed with progress, their reverence for cyclical time challenges our linear ambitions. Their pyramids aligned to the stars remind us that human achievement doesn't require industrial might, just ingenuity and patience, and their unresolved mysteries. They're an invitation to keep exploring not just their past but our own capacity for wonder. The Mayans don't just haunt our movies and myths, they hold up a mirror, asking us why we're so desperate to find answers or invent them in the shadows of their ruins. From vanishing cities to celestial mirrors, from blood-stained cenotes to uncrackable calendars, the 30 mysteries we've explored aren't just isolated curiosities. They're threads in a vast, tangled web, each one pulling us deeper into the heart of a civilization that refuses to be fully known. Think of the Maya not as a single story, but as a library where half the books are written in invisible ink. The more we decipher, the more we realize how much is still missing. Take their collapse. Why did some cities thrive while others crumbled? Was it drought, war, or something darker, like a loss of faith in the gods who demanded so much blood? Then there's their science, so advanced it feels out of place. How did they track Venus with pinpoint accuracy or engineer pigments that outlast empires? And those eerie, eccentric flints carved with impossible precision, were they sacred offerings or something even weirder? Every answer we uncover spins off into three new questions, leaving us equal parts awestruck and unnerved. But here's the thing, these aren't just ancient riddles, they're invitations. The Maya challenge us to rethink what we know about time, power, and even reality itself. Their world was one where pyramids were clocks, kings became gods, and the boundary between life and death was as thin as a reflection in a magnetite mirror. Maybe that's why we're still obsessed with them centuries later. They force us to confront the limits of our own understanding. So what do you think? Did the Maya predict cosmic cycles we're only beginning to grasp? Were there vision serpents, glimpses into other dimensions, or just hallucinations induced by toad venom? Drop your wildest theories in the comments, because history isn't set in stone. It's a conversation, and the Maya left plenty of unanswered questions to fuel it. And this is just the beginning. From the labyrinthine ruins of Teotihuacan to the sunken cities of the Mediterranean, ancient civilizations have buried secrets waiting to be unearthed. So hit subscribe, because we're just getting started. The past isn't dead, it's hiding in plain sight, whispering to those who know how to listen. And trust me, the next chapter is even